DC, the boys, Alabama Prisoner Profiles. What's going on with y'all, man? Make sure y'all like, subscribe, share the video, comment on the video, donate to the channel's Cash App and PayPal if you feeling generous, man. Say, man, we hit 9,000 subscribers, man. I appreciate y'all on this road to 10K, man. I do this for y'all and for current and former prisoners, as well as the general unsuspecting public, right, man? Shout out our sponsor, PAX Los Angeles. Make sure y'all visit their online store linked in the description for the gas, edibles, vapes, merch, etc., man. Shout out Hayden for that 10 on Cash App, man. If y'all only knew, y'all be coming through. Every little bit helps on my cousin. Now we're picking back up on part 2 of former Alabama prison warden Oscar D's account from the book Alabama Bound, 45 Years in a Prison System, detailing his journey of working through the system starting back from 1931. I've reworded some of this to make it easier to understand. Here we go. I got shot in 1934. A prisoner took a gun from a guard and shot me with the 38/40 rifle. Now, if anybody knows what kind of rifle that is, I done asked, bro, what the hell is a .38/.40 rifle, man? Came right near killing me, and I stayed in the hospital for 36 days. Soft nose bullet. I still got the bullet in me. If I hadn't stood up in the saddle, he would have killed me because he would have shot me right through the chest. He shot me through the top part of the hip, though. At the time, I was running the dogs, and he was a trustee, a dog boy, a white boy, too, and I fed him off my own table. But he had a criminal record. They had him for carnal knowledge to start with. That was fooling with a girl under 16 years of age. Well, then they got him for attempted rape. He finished that sentence. Then they got him for attempted rape again, and he finished that sentence. All right. Then they turned him out, and he got in the penitentiary for rape again, and they give him a life sentence. Interjecting Fred D. Sr., which is the son of Oscar D's, his account, because y'all remember they're sitting under a shade tree for these accounts. The warden, his son, who also worked for the system, and his daughter-in-law. Daddy couldn't get back up on the horse. He drug himself about 1.5 miles before they ever found him. They then loaded him in the car and brought him to the state farm. The convict shot him pretty close to where he lives at now, over in that community near Atmore. They drove all the way back to the state farm with him, carried him in the back of an old car, and I went out to the window and seen him. He had khaki clothes on, and his clothes was bloodied all over. You couldn't see a spot on him that wasn't blood. He had passed out then. Then they carried him to the doctor in Atmore and hauled him all the way to Century, Florida, about 30 miles, where there was a hospital, which now the doctor seen him before he left the state farm. They had a doctor there that stayed there. In other words, he lived in a house. He was the doctor for all the convicts and doctored all the personnel too. One of those doctors that wore a cape. Diddy was running the convict then. After the convict shot him, he got the gun, picked it up, braced it on his clothes and said, "That's for D's." Later, the sheriff caught him. They kept him for a long time. During the time that Daddy was warden at Katona in Birmingham. Back to the warden. Well, he shot me. We made a trustee out of him and all, and then he shot me. He gave him another parole. In other words, he got some prisoner or another in there. We had prisoners in the office. He got them to do away with that record in there where he took a gun away from a guard and shot me with it. He had them do away with that record so it wouldn't show on his record in Montgomery. Well, the parole board paroled him. I run into this sumbitch in Birmingham, and I thought he was out on escape. And he seen me and took off running. Of course, he was scared. He's afraid I'd kill him. So he run. So I called up there to Montgomery, and I asked if they let McCann out, and they said, yeah, we paroled him. I said, you mean you gave that prisoner parole after he took a gun away from a guard and shot me with it? And Ms. Marshall, she was the head of the parole board then, she told me, she says, Dees, it don't show on his record where he took a gun and shot you with it. I said, well, hell, he sure did, and it's supposed to be on his record. Well, they got to checking, and she called me back and told me, says, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll send and get him, have him picked up. I told him, I said, no, just leave him out. If he'll do right, that's all right with me. So about a month after that, they caught him in a tourist court with a 12-year-old girl, and both of them with their clothes off. So they brought him back to the penitentiary, and just before I went back to Kilby, he had a heart attack and died. My own interjection here, pause. Jesus Christ, I want to pause and highlight this warden's compassion for the quote-unquote lowest form of human being, right? After being hit up by this inmate, he abdicates for his freedom even though it's a mistake. And look what happened as a result of it, man. Heavy-ish to live with on your heart, man. Shooting an escapee. Oh, they'd escape all right, and you lose your job if you didn't shoot him. That was the rules. You'd also lose your job if you went to sleep on one of those tires up there where you were supposed to stay awake and watch around the perimeter of the prison. Interjecting Fred D. Sr. McCann made parole and Daddy was at the bus station one night for some reason or another. I don't remember. But anyway, he seen McCain at the bus station and McCann run from him when he seen him. But when he broke his parole, he was put back in Kilby and Daddy went back. He was laid off, during that time, and when he went back, he went to work at Kilby. McCann was in the hospital then. He had died in the prison hospital. It was about 8 of the 9 years. He served about 8 or 9 years after he shot Daddy before he got out, and Daddy ran into him at the bus station. Perimeter fence. See that nobody got out. They had a railroad steel out there and let you hit it just like a clock striking. And if you missed one of them, the man at the front started it. Tower number 1, number 2 tower, number 3 tower, number 4 tower, right on round, and you follow it right behind the other. Well, alright, if number 1 tower hits, then number 2 don't hit. They sent a guard around there and seen what was wrong. And if he was asleep, that was his ass and his job. They paid $15 a head if a prisoner escaped and got away from us. They paid $15. Not to us, no. I got paid just like a guard. Draw the check just like a guard. After he got away from us and somebody happened to see him and catch him, they pay him $15 for catching him. Now, you wouldn't pay if you just got told where he's at, because you went and got him. Sometimes the warden would still pay, but it'd just be the goodness in him. Now, I shot one when I first went to work there. He run out of an uncle of mine's squad and I shot him. 97 steps, and I shot him down. Of course, he died after that, and he was in there for stealing chairs out of a Nagger church. That was the only prisoner I had to run away from me. He run from my uncle, my mother's brother, and I shot him. He was 97 steps from where I was standing to where he fell. But he run from my mother's brother. I shot him. I was carrying a sports gun, a shotgun, double-aught buckshot. I shot over him the first time and hollered for him to stop, and he didn't stop. And I had been working there but just a little while, and he kept running. There was an old guard pretty close to me. He was too far to shoot him, so he hollered and told me, "All right, Dees, if you're gonna do anything, you better do it." So I had an old shotgun that belonged to me that I was using that had hammers on it. So I cocked the other barrel and I shot him. He fell like a sack of potatoes. Of course, they got over there to take the shot out of him. There was a bunch of guards there with me, and we was digging up stumps off the farm, cleaning up that farm you see out there. There was 40 men pretty close to where I was at. I actually brought him in and out the field digging stumps. I heard him when he dropped the shovel, and I turned around and he was running, and I hollered for him to stop, and he was running from one of Mama's brothers. Of course, there wasn't no way in the world for my uncle to shoot, so I ordered him to stop, and he didn't pay no attention to me, so I shot over him and hollered for him to stop again. He didn't stop, then I shot him. I killed that fella. They took him over to the prison and took him to the hospital and a doctor in Atmore. Dr. Weber was the doctor then. He come out and examined him, and all he said was the shot worked out of his back when he was moving around. Fragments dropped right out of his back. Well, I didn't think they did, but 2-3 days later, after his fever run up high, and they carried him to Atmore and took x-ray pictures, and one of them shots went in his kidney. And he done got blood poisoning, and blood poisoning killed him. The shot didn't kill him. If they would have took him on down there that evening and took an x-ray picture and found the shot, cut it in right there and got it, the man probably be living today. At that time, they had a rule. If you didn't shoot him, you lost your job. Now, we used to work all that land up through that bottom. We worked it all. Everything was cleaned up. You could see if a man run away up yonder, you could get out and see him coming across there. In other words, they just wouldn't run because you could see him from too far away. Dealing with parents. There's one time when I was a dog warden, there was one whole year I didn't have but 13 men to run, and I caught 12 of them. We had around 1,700 men then. I want to pause right there to note the number of staff members they had present back then, way back then versus today. I bet we don't even have half that working in our prison today, man. Cool thing I thought I'd point out. I don't think they have too many run today because they keep them all locked up. A 10-year-old boy could keep them locked up, but put them out there to work them in these fields, they got to have some men that'll stay on the job and watch them, or they'll lose a whole lot. They'll lose more than 13 a year because they'd have more than that in trustees walk off, I imagine. I mentioned the mother gave her sons quilts and things, right? Well, a mother will do anything for her son. That's love that's naturally there. I've seen mothers come and give boys money, the last penny they had. Probably didn't have nothing to eat when they got home. Before they could get outside the prison, he'd be done lost that money for buying some dope or another this here sexual stuff that they, sex perverts, would spend it that way and use the last nickel they had. Well, one day, I had a mother and a father. I never would hold nothing from a mother and father. That's the hardest thing to do. One of the hardest things to do in the prison is to tell a mother and a father a lie. And I just naturally wouldn't do it. See, I gotta pause again right there, man, to highlight more humanity of the staff back then. You know what I'm saying? These days, the entire system is trained to lie to you, especially if some BS done happen. You know what I'm saying? We all know it's documented in the advocacy groups weekly. Parents complaining about them trying to get information and either being lied to or given the runaround, man. SMH. Boys. And how sorry the boy is. Well, they come in my office. I was at Kilby, and they come in the office and they say, something has happened to my boy since he's been in the penitentiary. He's changed. Well, I knew that he was a sex pervert, a homosexual. He was, if you want to tell it like it is, he was the girl. So I told his mother, I says, you go on out and I tell your husband what's wrong with your boy. Then he can tell you. I won't tell you. I'll tell him and he can tell you. Well, I told this boy's father, and his father cried, and he says, Mr. Dees, I knew that there was something wrong with my boy. He ain't the same boy he was when he come in. But I never keep nothing away from the parents. I told him if he was a she, I'd tell him. I says, that boy is not worth the powder and shot it would take to kill him. And I told one mother one time, I says, when this boy was born, you'd been better off if you just pulled his head off and throwed him in a trash can. You would have saved a whole lot of pains and heart and a whole lot of trouble and a whole lot of money. And he won't never be worth a nickel to you, to him or nobody else. That's bad to say to a mother, but I says, I'm just telling you now, when you give birth to him, if you just pulled his head off and throwed him in a trash can, you'd been better off and everybody else would have been better off. And they would, of course. He was one of the sorriest prisoners I ever did see. Right. Pause, man. Right after I highlighted dude's humanity, shake my head. This may not be monetized. He just went in so respectfully, like, all your troubles in the penitentiary is mostly about gal boys. 90% of your killings in the Alabama penitentiary is over gal boys. Your gal boy sells himself. They'll go to the table to eat together. Generally on the Sunday, they give him a piece of steak or pork chop or a piece of chicken or something like that. They wouldn't give him all they could eat. They just give him one piece. Well, the tush hog would give his gal boy his piece of chicken or his pie or his extra whatever it was. A tush hog is a man that has his gal boy. That's a tough nagger. He's tough. A gator is one that really don't take no crap off nobody. He's an individual by himself. He goes for bad. But now, a tush hog, he's got his wife. That's convict slang for boy. As long as a man could keep his wife straight, I'd just let it alone. In other words, if he got to running over a prisoner or mistreating him some way or another, I'd step in and get him straight. But if he just wanted to live like that and wanted to do things like that, okay, there wasn't nobody making him do it. That was left up to him, so I didn't do nothing about it. One time, we locked all the gal boys up to where they separated them from the rest of the convicts. We made them make us a cell, put all the gal boys in it, and put the men in the other cells. We couldn't do nothing with them gal boys. They tore up all our plumbing, tore up all the beds and everything else. We couldn't do a thing in the world with them. We fed them separate and everything. Come to find out, they'll do it in the street. So when they get in here, they'll do it in here. We found out it's better to let them run loose because their husband would keep the wife straight, sort of like in the free world. They can handle them better by mixing them up than they could by trying to separate them. People are funny. You can't tell about people. Fred D. Sr. comment. In the road camps, we wouldn't have that problem. We didn't have as much in the road camps because we didn't have as many prisoners. But when we come up with that situation, we would for punishment to stop it. as much as we could, dress the woman up in woman's clothes, and handcuff them together on the visiting yard on Sunday and let all visitors see them. And that discouraged a lot of homosexual behavior. Trustee/road camps. And they doing something now that we've always done. We've tried it 2-3 times. It won't work. They're doing it now, and I hope it works for them. But I can't see where it's going to work. They're building a trustee barracks on the outside of the prison, going to put the trustees out there. Well, the trustees are going to slip off to some women or another, which you can't hardly blame them, and all that sort of stuff. There's no supervision out there. If it's supervised, then they just as well put a cell in the prison and call it a trustee cell. Put all the trustees in there, and they won't have to be but one bunch of supervision, where they're going to have 2 bunches of supervision, run 2 kitchens and all that sort of stuff. In the road camps, they would let their wives visit them. We didn't have the facilities for that, which you couldn't hardly start in the prison know-how, because they'd be claiming it was his wife and it wasn't his wife. Next thing you know, you'd be letting somebody's women folks in there and cause some trouble. You couldn't afford to do it in the prison. The road camps you could. Most of the time they try to send the prisoner as close to his home as they could. In one way it's alright, and in one way it's not. Cause you're liable to let a man's daughter in there that claims she's some prisoner wife or another. She comes up pregnant, and that man sues the state of Alabama for no telling what. So you can't do no stuff such as that, much less in other words. As long as it's colored, it's alright. Suspension. The reason I got suspended had to do with escapes. When we could, we used informants. In this case, I was told to give him some canned goods from the prison to a woman for payment, which I did. Well, later they said, we're going to charge you with using state property for your personal use, and $50 will get the thing satisfied. But that was after my suspension. I was suspended right close to a year. I was the warden at Katona then. What did I do that whole year? Well, I run a store. I bought a little old grocery store down here, right here at the end of Green Street in Atmore. Me and my wife had between $9,000 and $10,000, and I come down there and bought that little old grocery store. I sell stuff on credit, and I was eating white meat and bologna sausage and Waegners and everything else, trying to make ends meet. Folks was buying T-bone steak, center cut ham, and all that sort of stuff, sitting on the front row of the church, and they just eat up between $9,000 and $10,000, and on top of that, they'd eat up another $2,000 my mama had let me borrow from her. So when I got all this thing settled, when I went back to work for the state, I got a lawyer there at Evergreen. He's dead now. Got him to open it up every Saturday and sell it. I went and took inventory, and I had enough stuff in there to pay off the bills I owed. And so I opened it up every Saturday and sold it at cost and paid off my bills and all that sort of stuff. I give him books and all, so I went back to work for the state, and he settled the thing up. But I got enough money out of it to pay Mama and my brother back their money. I done that the night I closed, and my money, well, there's 2 fellas that joined the holiest church. One of them owed me $3 and something, and one of them owed me $4 and something. Well, if you belong to the holiest church, you got to pay your debt. So they sent me the money. That's all the money I got out. The other people never did pay. No, they never did. I paid my $50 fine and come on back, and I went with the director, and they put me back to work. But they wouldn't pay me from back time because I paid my fine. It didn't bother my work record because I didn't bother my retirement or nothing like that. I left all my retirement money just like I left it. Then whenever I went back to work, I picked it right back up. Whole lot of folks draws their retirement out if something happens to them, but I didn't draw my retirement out. So when I went back to work, I picked it up right where I left off, and that's how I come out and draw as much as I do today. Back to work. I went back to work at Kilby, and I had to borrow money. I had to borrow money to move to Kilby, and when I went back to work for the state, I stayed there until I retired. That's the only time in the whole 38 years I was off work, and I was doing what the boss had told me to do then. After I got away from Katona, which was in Birmingham, and got down to Kilby, that's all they wanted was to get me away from up there. As long as I was there, I run my business and let them run theirs, and I wouldn't let them interfere with my business, and I wouldn't interfere with theirs. Just like the morning the snow was all over the ground, and it was cold, and the prisoners didn't have good clothes, and they didn't have wool clothes. They didn't have nothing but cotton clothes, and in case of an emergency, it would have been all right. I'd have made arrangements to go out there and open the highway or something like that if traffic could have got blocked or something that way. but just ordinarily they went to check the men out, and I told them that I wouldn't let them have them because it was too cold. A man couldn't work out there with them cotton clothes on, and I wasn't going to put a prisoner out there to do something that I couldn't do. This was still at Katona, which consisted of about 150 to 250 men and women. So they had 2 prisons in Jefferson County, 2 just alike, one in the north end of the county and one in the south end of the county. That's the county Birmingham's in. So I called the fellers and told them what I had done. I also told the commissioner, the one I was having trouble with. I told him, I says, now you got a good overcoat. If you'll go out there and stand in front of the courthouse 30 minutes with the best clothes you've got a good old wool suit. Fred D. Sr. comment. He stayed laid off a year, so he had to go back. Let's see, I went to work for the state in 1952, so he had to go back. Must have been 1950 when he got laid off. So he went back to work in 51, because he had already been deputy warden at Kilby in 52. August of 52, when I went to work, which it didn't take him about 6 months to go from a guard to deputy warden when he went back to work. He hired back as a guard. Then he went to captain of the guard. Then he went to deputy warden. That's the policy. You go out there and you stand in that cold 30 minutes and you come back in here and call me and tell me a man can work out there in that cold weather and I'll check these men out. He says, nah, I ain't going out there to stand in no cold weather. I says, okay, I'm not going to check these men out unless it's an emergency, even if they're prisoners. I'm not going to check them out. So he got mad about that. My boss at Montgomery then put me over both camps because the other man had checked the men out. He checked his men out in that cold weather, so then he put me over both camps. If the weather's too bad for my men to work, I called him. I told him I didn't want him to check his out either. The men were working on roads all together. They paid us so much a month. So much a month for the prisoners. And we took them and took care of them and everything. The county would rent them from the state. When men couldn't work, I'd just leave them inside where it was warm because I didn't have a yard to turn them out in. But if it was too cold to work, they wouldn't be out in no yard. They'd be in cell blocks. Now, I want to pause again and point out, you see, he's referring to the convict leasing system that was in the news a couple back in a short little documentary clip, something about how the Department of Corrections is slaving people, some shit like that, right? Was in the news a couple months back. They still got it going on today with work releases and such, right? They could play cards or dominoes or whatever they wanted to do inside the building. Of course, I just had misdemeanors up there. I didn't have no hardened criminals. That was Katona, but it was a state prison, medium security. We had supervision over it. Yeah, they sent you to prison for misdemeanors back then. Now, we had some really tough prisoners, but I never had one I couldn't handle at any prison. They got some over at Atmore now they can't handle. Of course, they can be handled if they had the right man over there to handle them. There's prisoners over there that's done everything in the book. There's some prisoners over there that's done everything mentionable. Anything that a man can do, they've done it. I've stayed in it 38 years, and I know one thing. You got to have strict discipline if you run that maximum security prison over there. Discipline number 1, security number 2. Discipline. The Bible speaks to discipline all the way through it. Discipline, and whenever you get away from the Bible, you done got away from it all. If they run that prison up there in Atmore, according to the Bible, it says use the rod, don't spare the rod. It doesn't say nothing about no strap, but it says something about that rod, and that rod can be used as a strap, or an oak limb, or whatever you want to call it. But it means getting the man under control, see? It goes back to the fella that had a mule that wouldn't do right at all. He just couldn't do a thing in the world with him. So he told his neighbor, says, I got to do something with this mule. I can't do nothing with this mule. And the neighbor says, Mr. Jones, down the road there's a good man to train a mule. He could really train a mule. So he went down to see Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones told him, I'll be up there in the morning. So he come up walking the next morning. He had an axe handle in his hand. He says, where's that mule? He says, there he is, right out there. Says, run him in that stall. They'd run him in the stall. He shut the door and got in there. He just began to beat that old mule good and proper. See, the man open the door and says, hey there, Mr. Jones, you going to kill my mule. What have you done? Well, says Mr. Jones, first thing I got to do is get his attention. Well, if you don't get their attention and don't keep their attention, you ain't got no prisoners. The strap. A strap is about 6 feet long. And at the end they used to hit a man with has got about, I'd say 18 inches. It's just a strap about 3 inches wide. It's just like a razor strap. Now it tapers from that 18 inches up to the handle where you, the man that uses it, a piece of leather on each side of it, the width of the leather that they use at the tip. And it makes it stiffer up there to where he can control it. In other words, if it didn't have some support in it, you couldn't control it. And you're liable to hit a man in the back of the head. You're liable to hit him on his feet. A strap was used when a man committed a crime in the penitentiary. Say he cut another prisoner, they found him with a knife, or he quit work or murdered another prisoner or something like that. They could give him 21 lashes, but that's all they could give him. And that had to be in the presence of a doctor. And the doctor had to examine him before it was administered and all that sort of stuff. The doctor sit there all the time that you hit him, and you had to hit him on the buttocks. You couldn't hit him nowhere else. You couldn't hit him up on his kidneys or anywhere like that. You had to hit him on the buttocks. And sometimes they wouldn't give him but 3 licks, and the prisoner would, "I'll do better if you just quit." Which I think that's the most humane punishment there is. Cause this here putting them in solitary, locking them up in a place and leaving them there for so many days is a whole lot worse than just taking them and spanking them a little bit. Then that's the end of it. You can't say, some folks will say if a man was to give me a spanking with a strap, I'd kill him. Well, that's all bullshit. Man, I want to highlight the warden's distaste for solitary confinement. At this point, they had done away with that nationwide, deeming the strap, hitching rail, and shit like that to be inhumane and unconstitutional and cruel and unusual, man. There's nobody punished more than the prisoners that I have. And I've never met a prisoner on the street that wasn't glad to see me and always come over to shake my hand and all that sort of stuff. Which I tried to be fair. I tried to be where a man knowed I knew he was guilty before I punished him. And then I punished him, and I didn't hold nothing against him. I'd do as much for him as I'd do for anybody else. In order to use the strap, you write up to the director and tell him what this prisoner had done. Tell him you wanted the order to give him so many straps, lashes. Then the director would write you back and give you permission to whoop him. Well, alright, 21 licks is all you can hit him. That is the law. And there was a doctor who stood there and examined him before he was punished, and he examined him after he was punished. And the warden was there, the doctor, the deputy was there, and whoever, in other words, there was always 3 or 4 or 5 in there. Then whenever you got through with it, it was written on that sheet. If you didn't give him but 3 licks, a whole lot of times 3 licks, you could tell a prisoner was a changed man. That motherfucker hurt. Right then, that's the time to quit. You can't tell he's come under, and if you hadn't given him but 3 licks, just write it on that order that you just gave him 3 licks, and the doctor would sign it. The man's in good shape physically and everything. But at the time they threw that strap away, it was nothing but bread and water. The doghouse. A man could stay in the doghouse, say 20 days, and he would lose, a man your size, kind of skinny, would lose 6 inches in the waist. If he was sick, the doctor examined him every day. If he was sick in there, he took him out and put him in the hospital. Then whenever he got well, they put him back in there until he finished his time. The doghouse is about a 5x8, that's solitary confinement, and it hasn't got any windows in it. It's dark in there, and it's got a fan on top that runs and circulates air through it all the time, and you can't see out of it. It's dark. Like I say, there's no danger in it at all. The fan's running, circulating air in it. It's got central heat in it, just like the prison. There's no way for a man to freeze to death in there if he's in there without any clothes. I put one prisoner in there without any clothes. We got a floor in there for a toilet in the bottom of it, in the floor, just a hole. You put a toilet in there and they just tear it up. You flushed it from the outside. The guards flushed it. They flushed it about 4 times every 24 hours. That's what it was. Oh, if some guard went in there for some reason or another to pick one up, that you could hear them hollering and tell you they was sick in there, the guards would go in there and see about it. Then they go 3 times a day to feed them. Then they go between time to wash. They watered them 6 times a day and fed them 3 times a day. So naturally, if there was anything in there that was wrong, the guards would know. I don't imagine they'd get very hot in there, or very cold either, because you take a place that's got a breeze coming through it. Now, I didn't stay in there. I don't know how hot it would get, but the more men you had in there, the heat from their bodies would make them hot. If you just had one man in there, I imagine he'd get cold. But if you had 3, 4, 5 men in there, then their bodies would keep the place warm, see? That's what they got punished with. And it ain't enough to handle some of them. To handle one class of them, yeah. But to handle another class of them, no. You could put them in there for 21 days, and the doctor goes in there every day and checks them. Now, 21 days in that doghouse will actually hurt your health. Spanking your fanny won't hurt your health. It'll heal. It won't hurt you. It'll hurt your feelings. It takes one of them to hurt your health. The other one takes the pride out of you. You'd hate to get your fanny whooped, and you do anything you can from getting it spanked so your friends and your family would know it. So that's the reason I argue the strap is the best, because the solitary confinement will really hurt your health, and the strap won't hurt your health. Fred D's senior comment. That was the amazing thing to me. They could whoop him, give him 21 licks, done away with that, and come around with the doghouse or solitary confinement and set it up just like a strap. 21 days will kill you. An excerpt from the weekly Atmore Advance newspaper dated March 27, 1975. In two separate cases last week, the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in New Orleans found that a Fountain Correctional Center, formerly Atmore State Prison guard, did not impose cruel and inhumane punishment by using tear gas after a prisoner threw a cup of urine in his face. But the court ruled that isolation cells in Alabama's prisons are so bad that they constitute cruel and unusual punishment. In the latter decision, the court called for an overhaul of the lockup units, commonly referred to as the doghouse. In making the decision, the court overturned a decision by Judge Brevard Hand of Mobile that isolation was within the law. The New Orleans court, in overturning Hand, described one cell like this. As many as 7 of them are placed in a cell, which measures 6 by 8 feet. These cells are essentially concrete boxes with no bunks, toilets, sinks, or other facilities. A hole in the cell floor serves as the toilet. This is flushed 4 times a day per day by a guard who has access to the flushing mechanism. Flushing frequently causes the waste to back up onto the floor of the cell. Inmates placed in punitive isolation live in these conditions day and night for as long as 21 days. The court ordered Hand to enter an appropriate injunctive order to end such conditions. Punishment. Another thing. When a man does a crime or breaks a rule, he needs punishing right then, while it's on his mind, while he's got hell in him. Right then's the time to get it out of him. In 3 or 4 days, by the time you write to Montgomery and get an order and put him in the doghouse or give him a trial, now you got to have the judge and everything else over there to give him a trial, and he can get a lawyer and all that sort of shit. They ought to have several different types of punishment for different types of offenses. You just say, all right, I'm going to use the strap on everybody that breaks the rules. Well, I'd be against that, because you can take 5 boys in the same family, the same brothers and sisters, brothers. All of them have the same mother and father. There'll be 2 in that bunch that won't ever give no trouble. There'll be 2 in that bunch you can talk to and give them to do anything you want to. And there'll be 1 in that same bunch that you couldn't give them to do nothing right. You've seen it yourself in everyday life. So that's the same thing over here. Exactly. It ain't a thing in the world but a family of boys is what it is. Court excerpt. This case was brought by Holman inmate Robert McCrae and Fountain inmates Jerry White and Alvin Claiborne. The Fifth Circuit Court also ordered Hand to hold hearings on whether homosexuals should be separated from other inmates. McCrae claimed that homosexuals pose a serious security threat to other prisoners. In the decision involving the guard, the court ruled the guard, identified as Officer Greggs, was justified in using tear gas to stop a disturbance. Inmate Johnny Clemens brought the suit against the guard for damages. The incident happened July 16, 1972, while 3 guards were making a head count. The prisoners began cursing the guards and then threw liquid and solid objects at them, the court said. One of the canisters of tear gas used to stop the disturbance landed in front of Clemens' cell and was left there for 30 minutes. After the incident, the guard was punished by prison officials because they thought the use of They thought the use of tear gas was excessive. The guard was suspended for 1 week without pay. An example of what a prisoner would do to deserve punishment? Well, if he got out of hand, and if you had a rule, a warden over at the prison has got to set him up some rules and put that in prison where all the prisoners know what and what not to do. Let them know that. All right, then if they do it, if they haul off and take your money from you, then you punish him. If he kills another prisoner, punish him. In other words, he ought to be electrocuted. But you see, the Supreme Court's done away with the chair. Once it was automatically death if he killed a guard. He was automatically sent to the chair. If he killed another inmate, that would be left up to the jury. And of course it would be left up to the jury, but if he killed a free man, he'd sure get the chair. Of course, kill another inmate, it would be all depend on how he killed him and what he killed him for. From the newspaper The Advance, September 4th, 1975. Judge Johnson, United States District Court Judge Frank M. Johnson Jr. issued an order requiring the state to improve conditions in the isolation and segregation units at all prisons. He said that by noon Wednesday, September 3rd, all isolation and segregation cells must have toilets that flush from the inside, mattresses for inmates to sleep on, and proper lighting. Also, inmates must be served 3 meals a day instead of just one. Capps Associate Prison Commissioner Walter Capps, serving as acting warden of Holman Prison and Found Correctional Center, said Wednesday morning that segregation units at Holman and Found were ready to meet the court standards. The isolation units at Found and Holman have not been used for more than 6 months for remodeling, and they did not have to be completed yesterday. From an Association Press Wire story dated September 10, 1975, Montgomery, Alabama. God dang. I hope we'll see some electrocutions and all that sort of stuff. Cause some of them I know done things to other prisoners that really I wouldn't be blamed if the prisoner killed them. Now you've got a certain amount of convicts that likes discipline. 90% of them like discipline. All the prisoners that's trying to do right and get out, they like street discipline. They only the ones that's fussing is the ones that wants to run over the other ones. Another reason a convict wants, a certain percent of him, wants discipline is to where he can feel at ease and build his time. That was one of the things the prisoners always praised me for, because they could lay down and sleep at night knowing them gangs wasn't going to come down there and bother them. Because they knew I was going to take care of it, and take care of it I did. Somebody would tell me about it, and I'd see about it. Gangs. When I went to Kilby, they had what we called gangs. There's a little bunch of them that would run together and take money off other prisoners and all that sort of stuff. Rob the stores and what have you. Kilby was just as bad as it had ever been. So I had to handle it. Sort of ease the dead wood on the men that was doing it. Then I really got their attention. And I stayed there 9 years. And I didn't have a killing. And I didn't have a man cut. And I think that would be a good record right there. And I fixed it to where a prisoner could go to bed and lay his stuff down on the bed and they didn't bother it. And they could come up there and tell me so-and-so's got dope, where he's got it. I could go and get it and they'd tell me, Mr. Dees, you got a good many knives back there. And they'd tell me who's got them. I'd take a box down there, put it down in the cell and tell them that I wanted all the knives put in this box. I didn't care who had them. I just wanted them placed in that box. And if I caught one after this, I was going to punish them. I'd go back in a length of time, give him an hour or so to put them in there. I'd go back in an hour and the box generally was full of knives. And I didn't hear any more about no knives for a long time. That's the way I kept my knives out of the prison. And it boils down, you got one class that you can talk to. There's one class that ain't going to give you no trouble at all. Won't never give you no trouble. The incorrigible. There's one class that's just a little bit mischievous. They'll give you a little trouble. You can talk to them and get them straight. There's another class that you might have to use some little old amount of discipline on. But there's one class of prisoners over there that I would say the strap is the only salvation for. And you can't tell me it don't help a man 40 or 50 years old, because I've spanked men 40 and 50 years old, and they never give no more trouble. And I meet them on the street, and some of them say, if my daddy had done that to me, I'd never been in the penitentiary. And they didn't hold nothing against you. All of them were always glad to see me. I've always shook hands and been nice to them. So I just don't agree with the Board of Corrections. Think they're doing one of the worst things that's ever been done to let prisoners run the prisons. And these here psychologists and criminologists and all them sort of people, they're all right for crazy people if there's something wrong with his mind for them to talk to. But them folks over yonder, of course I agree that all of them has got a loose screw. There's something wrong in every man over there. It might be stealing, he just can't help it. He's just got to steal some. Might be fighting, might be robbing. Stealing Jesus generally runs on. When he starts to stealing, he'll finally wind up robbing, and fighting generally winds up as murderers and things like that. But I think in sex crimes, he's out of balance somewhere or another. That would make him want to take somebody and take advantage of them. There's something wrong with the man, and the Lord fixed him that way. And there ain't no psychologist or criminologist or money or nothing else going to change what the Lord done. When he was born that way. And when he dies, he's going to die that way. His records over there will prove it. Because if he starts off getting in the penitentiary for petty larceny, he'll wind up in there for robbery or something. He's going to keep doing it. Now, the man that comes in there and goes out, stays out, is a man whose temper got him in there. Probably some little old thing happened to him and got in there accidentally some way or another. Well, them kinds of fellas won't never come back. You can parole them the next day and they won't come back. And I think that a whole lot of prisoners wouldn't come back. If they bring a young boy in, say a teenage boy, 16 or 17 years old, bring him in the prison today, turn him in the prison with all that bunch and let him stay in there overnight. In the morning, bring him up to the office, hit him with 21 licks on the strap, turn him loose, he won't never come back. I think that would work in 95% of the young boy cases. That's something that he ain't never had, is somebody to give him a good spanking that'll let him know he ain't no gator and he ain't going to have things the way he wants it. Just give him a good spanking, tell him now, say, if you come back in here, this is what you're going to get. And he'll go out and behave himself, I believe. If the inmates wanted to discipline themselves, then they would do it, I suspect, but they get killed. That a bunch that I'm talking about wants to run the thing, that has took on the outside whatever they wanted and done whatever they wanted to do on the outside. Papa and Mama didn't correct him, got him out of jail every time he broke the law, bring him home and wouldn't punish him or nothing, wouldn't do nothing about it. Well, they not doing nothing. That's just like a patch of corn out there. You just throwing fertilizer on it and expecting to kill it makes it grow worser. In other words, call it you just throwing gas on the fire. That's exactly what you done. Now, if Papa went up there and got him out of jail, brought him home, took him out there behind that there barn and got his attention, well then, probably wouldn't have to go back up there and get him no more. But that don't happen. He comes home, Mama takes him under her arm and say, "Oh, son, they've done you wrong. They ought not to have done you that way." But if your mama told you, says, "Now don't you go in there and do so-and-so," and you went and done it, what did she do? She got on your fanny, didn't she? Well, that's what I'm talking about over there. Same thing. And if you haven't got it, you haven't got anything. If Jenny Lee tells Freddie, says, "Now Freddie, you can't do so-and-so," and she tells Fred, and he says, "I'm going to do it, I don't care what you say," and they let him go on and do it, they've done that kid an unjust. That's what I'm talking about right there. You go home wherever you come from, you can go down the street, and everywhere you find a family that's got discipline. The children do what their parents say, you'll see a good home. You see a family where children tell their mother and father what blah blah blah. You'll see a family where the children tell their mother and father what to do. You won't see no home. You understand what I'm talking about? That's the same way with the prison, or it don't mean prison, church, or anything else. Policemen, if the people of Atmore hadn't got respect for the police department, there ain't no use in having the police department. Discipline is something that works everywhere. Everything through life is discipline. Gangs at Kilby. Like I was saying before, when I first went to Kilby, they had them little old gangs there in the back. And I've been out there about 3 days, and I walked down the little white cell block, and this here Harold Leiter, he was one of them Jimmy Izzo's buddies. He told me, "Mr. Dees, now let me tell you something. You've been running all the prisons you've been in contact with, all the prisons you ever worked at. But I want to let you know, this here Kilby is different. You're not going to run this prison." Well, no more. He got it out of his mouth. I hung this cane and a 12 in the seat of his breeches, and I kicked him clear over a water fountain. And I reached out, got him by the collar, and dragged him all the way to solitary in the doghouse. Went back up there, told the warden what happened, wrote a report on him, and I never did have no more trouble out of him. It all boils down to when they know you mean business. That's all you have to do. If they know that you mean business, they're not going to run it. That's it. Damn, running it is one of them old, that has been around for a while, old saying. You won't have no trouble in the prison. It's just as easy to run a prison as if you was to run a family, and everybody was to understand that they have got to do right. Fred D's senior comment. The convicts would tell you that Daddy was the only man that could kick and punch at the same time. And there y'all have it, man. Let me know what y'all think about this in the comment section, man. Another 20 or so pages, man. A lot to unpack here, from the doghouse to the strap to his dislike for solitary to the boys to the warden's hard on for quote unquote discipline, man. I hope this is as interesting to y'all as it is to me to read and give it to you guys, man, because it's a joy to read, honestly. But yeah, man, y'all like, sub, share, donate to the channel's Cash App and PayPal at Bama Prison Files with 2 S's on the files. Visit the description and check out our sponsor, PAX Los Angeles. DC The Voice, Alabama Prisoner Profiles, out the gate.